We are in a global crisis. The Earth has been heating up, raising the normal temperature and causing climates to change. Whether it be less snow during the winter or sea levels rising to swallow up cities, or droughts that will be the killer of billions. These outcomes are from climate change. A main player in at least the northern hemisphere is Europe. If we take a look at the source for climate change in the northern hemisphere and the role that Europe plays in this, then we can start to understand how to stop these extreme weather phenomena and climate change itself. Our story starts in Earth's atmosphere. We are unique because our atmosphere is made of gases called greenhouse gases. What greenhouse gases do is absorb the heat from the sun, hold it, then send back heat out into space. The heat that is held travels to Earth and is absorbed by the surface and the oceans, where it will once again eventually be re-emitted as heat out to space. This is what's known as the greenhouse effect. One of the most prominent greenhouse gases is CO2, or carbon dioxide. CO2 levels fluctuate throughout the year, as it is absorbed by plants for photosynthesis during the warmer months of the year, lowering global levels of CO2. But in the colder months of the year, when plants die, CO2 levels increase as they're not being used, growing global levels. This pattern can be seen within these graphs and visualized with this animated model of CO2 levels throughout the year. Though in recent times, the levels of greenhouse gases have started to increase, limiting the cycle of CO2 throughout the Earth and causing the temperature of Earth to increase from the excess amounts of greenhouse gases in the air. But what is causing these greenhouse gases to build up today? The buildup of greenhouse gases and subsequent warming came from Europe. During the 1800s, Europe was the site of the historic movement called the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution was when Europe developed the technique of factorization, making it so that the harvesting, producing, transportation, and making of goods, food, etc. fell onto the jobs of machines, not humans. The thing with the machines, though, was that they ran on fossil fuels, natural resources from the earth that produce CO2 when burned and used. The massive number of productions that became factorized and the fossil fuels burned in accompaniment caused atmospheric levels of CO2 to skyrocket. With this new amount of egregious CO2 due to unnatural alters in the cycling of CO2, the temperature also grew along beside it, as observed in the relationship between greenhouse gases and temperature discussed earlier. A model that shows this correlation is shown here. Now that industry and factorization have become the new norms of production, and CO2 and temperature is starting to rise, some adverse effects will start to make themselves known. Globally, the world's CO2 and temperature have risen to dangerous levels, and these have created consequences in our climate. The excess heat is killing plants, responsible for absorbing some amounts of CO2, and now that CO2 is being absorbed, it will condensate even more, raising the temperature even more. Some graphs that project trends of temperature changes and CO2 levels are shown. A model of our temperature and CO2 levels by 2050 will help visualize this. Other consequences will be droughts that will prevent crops from growing and kill people from the lack of water, oceans rising from the melting of ice and glaciers, and the eventual death of living things on Earth. To recap, Earth is kept habitable by the exchange of CO2 and greenhouse gases and the transfer of heat, but this is becoming harder and harder to do so as industrialization has taken over production and emitted high levels of CO2, causing greenhouse gases to build up and heat to be trapped in Earth, affecting our planet through the death of plants, extreme weather phenomena, and the eventual end of humanity. Now that we know the source of our problems, which has Europe being responsible for climate change in the Northern Hemisphere by being the kickstarter of industrialization across the world, we can make strides to reduce the products of CO2 that come from industrialization. This can be through changing our fuel sources to renewable options, driving vehicles that use fossil fuels less, or bring back human-driven production, as seen by the trends of weather and climate in the future. If each person doesn't act now to instill these changes, then I'm afraid our planet will cease to exist and will be reduced to a sphere of desert, rock, and strange weather.